Hi, I'm Joe Graydon.
And I'm Terry Graydon. This podcast of the People's Pharmacy is brought to you by Squatty Potty Toilet Stools. They create healthy toilet posture for fast, easy elimination. Learn more about toilet posture and health at squattypotty.com. That's SQUATTYPOTTY.com. Welcome to the People's Pharmacy, Dr. Schoblood.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Schoblood, can you tell us a little bit about your personal history? I mean, not only are you an expert audiologist and a professional in this field, but you have a personal interest. Tell us why.
Yeah, actually, I was identified my hearing loss by accident when I was about 5 years old. Back in those days, they did not automatically test the siblings of a child that has been identified, and my older sister already had been identified with hearing loss. So I was along to see the audiologist with my younger brother, who was starting to exhibit traits that were similar to my sister's, and they discovered that he had hearing loss. And the audiologist came out to the waiting room and said to my mother, Mrs. Johnson, we think we need to test Stephanie too. And my mother was actually quite surprised because she didn't think that I had a hearing loss. But sure enough, they discovered that I had a hearing loss as well. And so I started to wear a hearing aid when I was in first grade.
What was that like?
Not so fun. You know, this was back in the early 70s when mainstreaming was just coming around the bend. And so we were the three kids in the Sutton public school systems that were different. And I think nowadays we're used to seeing so many different kinds of things in the school system. But so we were these three kids walking around with hearing aids. And
in those days, those hearing aids were really obvious.
Oh, they were big, yeah. With a little box that I wore in a harness underneath my clothes, and it was, positioned about chest level, and then the cord came up and went into my ear. My hair was quite long to hide it, though, until I finally was able to get one of those smaller hearing aids in fourth grade, because I just didn't want anyone to know. And I can very vividly recall in first grade when my teacher called me up to the front of the room, and I was the good straight-laced student who, if you were called to the front of the room, I mean, you were nervous. And I went up and she said, do you want to tell everybody about your hearing aid? And I can remember so vividly, even to this moment, the feelings that I had, no, please don't make me. And so I didn't tell people that I had hearing loss. I knew they knew, but I didn't want to talk about it. Then in fourth grade, I got a smaller hearing aid behind my ear. And I was a really good student, so I was sort of breezing through school. My siblings had more pronounced hearing loss from a younger age, so they had therapy with the audiologist and the speech-language pathologist all growing up. And I had a progressive loss, so my hearing continued to decline, except I was doing so well in school that we failed to test it for about 5 years. And one night I recognized that after I'd taken my hearing aids out and was talking to my mother, I couldn't hear her any longer. And I said, Mom, do you realize I'm asking to look at your face now? I can't hear you when you're talking to me. So we got back into the audiologist and discovered that I had had quite a significant drop. So the lesson there was, that you should see your audiologist on a regular basis when you have documented hearing loss, even if insurance won't cover it. There are things that sometimes can be caught sooner and treated rather than just letting something mull along.
Dr. Schoblood, the technology for helping people with severe hearing deficits has changed since you were in first grade, and I understand that now you use a cochlear implant. Can you tell us how you decided that that was the right technology for you and when that happened?
Yes, I knew for a long time, having been an audiologist for over 17 years now, that a cochlear implant was always something that I might need. And so it was never a question of, will I do it, but when will the time be right? After my second child was born, I had enough hearing loss that I wasn't able to hear on the telephone any longer. And I really wanted an improved quality of life. So I went to the team at UNC Hospitals to have the workup. And basically there was nowhere to go but up. My scores were so bad, I couldn't understand one word on the word testing without visual cues. So underwent the whole test battery to see if I was a candidate, make sure that anatomically I was a candidate. And I had the background that my brother had already gotten an implant successfully 8 years prior. And he was hearing better than me at this point in my life. So I was a little bit jealous and very motivated to get the implant. And so I scheduled the surgery at the end of the semester because I didn't want to miss any of my teaching responsibilities at UNC. And my brother actually flew in to see the mapping. I had flown up for his when he got his, and he flew down to see mine. And it was very interesting because when they first activated the sound, I started to cry. And UNC was doing a story on this deaf audiologist getting an implant, so there were cameras in there filming. And I can look back at this many times, and it looks like they're tears of joy, but actually in that moment I was petrified about what I had done because the sound was just so different than anything I had ever heard. But the audiologist that was working with me, who was a former student of mine, started to talk with me, and she put a piece of paper up in front of her mouth and started to say words. And as awkward and sort of foreign as it sounded to me, I understood what the words were. And she was saying days of the week, and I was saying Tuesday, Thursday, and she was saying, you're getting them. And it was just amazing how quickly I sort of learned to hear again. I would like to make a disclaimer. Not everyone is going to have that same quick response. I had the advantage of having used amplification for many years, so my auditory pathway was strong. And so this is another reason that we encourage patients not to go so long before they treat their hearing loss, because proper treatment and stimulation of that auditory nerve is very important.
For our listeners who don't really understand what a cochlear implant is, can you give us a brief understanding?
Yes. Basically, there is an internal piece that has an array of electrodes that is fed into the cochlea, which is the organ of hearing, and it helps to stimulate the nerve. Then there's an external piece, and it's usually connected via a magnet from the outside. The external piece does the processing and sends the sound inside to the array, which then sends an electrical signal to the brain. The brain learns to interpret that electrical signal as speech.
Now, you, of course, had an extreme case of hearing loss. You had pretty much lost all of your hearing prior to the cochlear implant. Many of our listeners have lesser degrees of hearing loss. Some, like me, can kind of get by unless we're in a crowded room or a restaurant and there's a lot of background noise. And then we sort of watch people's faces very intently, nod frequently, and pretend we're actually hearing what they're saying. For those people like me who have some degree of hearing loss, why is it valuable to actually enhance your hearing? And what is that revelation, that process that you went through with the tears? Like all of a sudden now you're hearing again. But for people like me who just will hear better, what is that like as an audiologist?
Yeah, I think the hard part is hearing loss is such a silent change. You don't realize it's happening, and it happens over such a long period of time that I think our patients forget how good it can be. And so we are really fortunate at our clinic, the UNC Hearing and Communication Center. We're getting patients in sooner. We're seeing more people with milder hearing losses, and they are coming in and saying, wow, I had no idea what I was missing. Those folks tend to have better outcomes quicker because they didn't wait as long. My patients who have waited 5 to 7 or 8 years, in a half an hour, we give them back sound that they haven't heard in that long, and it's a lot for the brain to take in. So from the standpoint of trying to get that quality of life back, the sooner one does something about it, the better the outcomes are.
What are the main barriers to somebody coming in to get that attention that they may not realize they need?
Barriers as far as, like cost, or I think the vanity is also a huge thing. Even in Europe, where they give hearing aids away, not everyone purchases them or gets them. So I think that there's definitely that sort of pride issue that patients need to get past. We spend a lot of time at our center working on motivation that the patient has. Are they motivated to improve? Are they changing their life activities because they're not hearing? And when you start working through those things with patients, they really start to say, yeah, I am not going out as often with friends. I've stopped playing bridge. I don't enjoy doing that. And that's what gets them to do something.
Why do you think the vanity issue is such a big deal? I mean, people wear eyeglasses all the time without thinking twice. I see kids walking around with headphones. I see people with their, the little Bluetooth device in their ear so that they can take a remote phone call from their cell phone. But when it comes to hearing aids, people seem so resistant. Why?
Yeah, I wish I could tell you. I was 30 years old before I was willing to put my hair up. Moving to North Carolina sort of made that a no-brainer. It was so hot down here, I finally had to just put my hair up. But it's a pride thing. I think it's sort of like saying I'm less than perfect. And glasses used to sort of have a negative connotation too years and years ago, and now they're fashion outlets. I think the manufacturers are doing a better job with colors and designs that are pretty and sort of blend in better. So I think that's going a long way to help the vanity issue. But I really can't pinpoint exactly why each person chooses not to do something for the looks.
Dr. Sjoblad, you mentioned cost as one of the factors that slows people down. And when we see the numbers, it's not surprising because today's modern, high-tech digital hearing aids can run $2,000, $3,000 or more per device. That's a little scary for people. It's like, can I really afford hearing aids?
Yes, and I totally understand that point. I think one of the problems that we as a profession have done is suggest that they're paying for just hearing aids to start with. And so I've been involved with a national movement with the American Academy of Audiology because we started a movement at our clinic to try to be more transparent in pricing and itemize so that the patient understood what they were paying for when they came in. So that has gone a long way to help people understand that the device itself is not what's $2,000, $3,000, and $4,000, but the services of the practitioner and the provider included in that package price are what the patient is paying for. And so in America, of course, we're used to insurance covering lots of things, and hearing aids are not typically covered by insurance plans, and so that's definitely a disadvantage for our mindset. Someone else is going to help us pay for this. So I do think that contributes to people not deciding to do something. At our clinic, what we have done is tried to separate out the price and charge the patient also only for the services that are needed to get them properly fit. That includes, measuring their loudness tolerance levels, deciding on some goals so that we can measure outcomes, fitting them and verifying the fitting with real ear probe mic measures, and then following up with them for about 6 weeks, counseling them through the rehab, because the hearing aids don't cure hearing loss. And that's, I think, a very important problem that needs to be addressed, is that hearing aids aren't the only part of the solution. At the end of the 45 days, we discharge the patient, and we recommend seeing them in 6 months for a follow-up. Most other clinics that are bundled in that price that you mentioned earlier, $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, they are including services into the future, well into the future. And our model that we are trying to have catch on is to say, let's not pay for things we haven't used yet. And we are finding that to be very, very positive, and we have a really good track record of it at our clinic. It works.
Now, when you say hearing aids don't cure hearing loss, what do you mean?
Yeah, hearing aids amplify sound. They bring sound into the auditory system, and then that sound goes to the brain. But everybody's ability to interpret sound is different. You can have two people with the same exact audiogram, but one person has 100% word recognition. The other person has 50% word recognition. That is a processing issue. The hearing aids are not going to restore that. Therefore, you need the other component that the audiologist offers, which is the oral rehab, the classes, the counseling, communication management strategies. Those are all a vital part of successful outcomes for hearing treatment.
Are there some people for whom hearing aids are really not going to help very much? In other words, are there just some people who are not good candidates, and why not?
I'm going to say it's worth a try on every patient. There are certainly levels of hearing loss that we should be bringing them right over to the hospitals for cochlear implant workups. But even cochlear implants require that patients have a certain time period in a trial with conventional amplification, because we're talking about surgery. I have fit people with all kinds of hearing losses with hearing aids, and they all have some measure of success. At our clinic, less than 1% of our patients return their hearing aids. It's about the methods that are used to help that patient get to the end point that they want. Realistic expectations are vital. Somebody that has word recognition of 20 or 30% can't expect to hear on the telephone without some accessory devices like caption phones or something like that. but we work with the patient to help them get those other tools. So that's why I say hearing aids can help anybody, but you're going to probably need more tools for some losses than for others.
How often do people have unrealistic expectations?
Well, I don't know. The population we serve, I think they tell a lot of their friends how we're doing things at our clinic. And so I find that not very often when I'm going through do I have somebody that's just completely out in left field as far as what we're going to be able to accomplish. They also maybe are slightly older, so they're a little wiser. But occasionally you do have someone. And that, I think, is an important part of the process where you're really not just picking a set of hearing aids up out of a box and sticking them in someone's ear. You're really counseling through the whole process so that they understand this is what hearing aids can do. And with the testing that one can do and that we do at our clinic at the UNC Hearing and Communication Center, we can isolate these things and have these conversations before the patient puts hearing aids on.
Now, you're unusual in the sense that you are both a professional audiologist with a great deal of experience and training, but also a patient, someone who really understands what it's like to be on the other side, dealing with hearing loss yourself. Most of your audiologist colleagues don't know what that's like. So what makes that experience different?
Yeah, I will agree. And to tell you the truth, when I went to get into this profession, my audiologist told me she didn't think I could do it because I didn't have good hearing. And so I was delighted when I met someone at UNC that thought I could do it. And it has been such a positive thing for me to be able to talk with clients. And I have clients that will come in and say, no, I don't want to work with anyone but Dr. Sjoblad. She gets it. One of the things I'm trying to do with our students at UNC, at our training facility, is helping them understand it's really important to listen to the clients and to hear what they're talking about, not just to push forth a lot of information. And we do require our students to go through some listening exercises, wearing hearing aids, or plugging their ears so they can get that feeling of when you're missing things. But I will agree, it's been a plus for me that I never thought it would be.
One of the concerns that comes up periodically is that the various kinds of hearing aids, the kind that goes into the ear, the kind that goes way deep into the ear because that way it won't be visible, the kind that sits behind the ear, all of these different kinds of hearing aids have pluses and minuses. The old kind that you probably wore when you were a child was, really plugging up in the ear, and it probably gets fairly damp and humid, and, there are probably infections that occur as a result. And so I'm just sort of curious, how does a patient determine, do I want the cheap kind that goes in the ear that's visible, or the kind that's way in the ear and is invisible, or do I want the kind that has that little wire that goes from behind my ear?
Yeah, I think that's a really valid question to ask. One of the things we're training our students to do and that we do at our center is we spend time at the preliminary appointment choosing hearing aids with the patient. We call that the functional communication assessment. We measure their loudness. We measure their ability to hear in background noise, which is something that really a lot of people struggle with. And again, like I mentioned before, some people can do really well in background noise. Other people can't. Then after we get that test information, we sit down with the client and we interview them and ask them about their lifestyle. How often are they going to restaurants? How often are they in various environments? Do they go to lectures? How are they doing at the movies? When we get all of that objective and subjective information, sometimes it makes it very clear. We cannot fit you with one of these little teeny tiny way down in the ear canal hearing aids because you have very poor recognition of speech and background noise. You need directional microphones. And directional microphones come on the bigger style hearing aids. And the best ones for that are the ones that go over the ear, called the behind the ear. And so as we work through these issues with the patient and we have all of this sort of concrete data versus just laying them out on a jury board and saying, which one do you like? I think that goes to helping us have successful outcomes because the patient's been involved in the process and they've seen all along that there was a method to our madness, that there was a reason we did these tests, and it's helping us to figure out which hearing aids. The in-the-ear ones are very suitable for some people, and we're not opposed to fitting those if it's suitable for the person.
One of the things that we've noticed is that people are looking for ways that they can save on a variety of healthcare items, including hearing aids, as you pointed out. Insurance doesn't generally cover them. So people are looking for online or catalog or drugstores or big box stores where they can buy a hearing aid for less money. Can they still get audiology services that will help them adapt and use that hearing aid effectively?
That's a very good question. It's going to depend on a number of things. What we are noticing is some of these big box locations and retail outlets are locking their technology. And I think consumers need to be informed about this. I'm not suggesting consumers shouldn't try to find the best price they can. I'm a consumer. I tend to bargain hunt and look for the most frugal way to purchase something. There are some things where you should cut corners on, and there are some things that you shouldn't. If one purchases a device from one of those locations and they want to see a different provider, they need to be ensured that the device is not locked, because otherwise someone else cannot help them. So we definitely see a number of people that come to our center who have purchased devices online or retail outlets or the big box stores, and we want to help them, but it's proprietary software and we can't. So I think if a consumer's made an investment in something, they should have the right to be able to take that to any provider that they want. We do see patients who get hearing aids from many different outlets. Our particular clinic, we're trying to train the students how to be ready for any patient that walks in the door. There are other audiologists that may feel differently about this and feel like, nope, I'm not going to help them. They didn't come to me. But I don't think that's going to serve them well in the future, because I do think that the avenues and the models are changing for hearing care. There are audiologists that sometimes frequent these locations, so that's certainly, I think, the first step is to see whether there is a qualified professional audiologist in those centers when purchasing. But there are a lot of other things to look at besides just the price.
And it sounds as though one thing you should definitely ask is this device locked?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I have a woman I saw on Monday, and, sometimes people don't predict that they may need this, but this woman is needing to move to North Carolina because she has health issues. She needs to get closer to her sons and daughters. Her hearing aids are not that old. I would love to be able to reprogram them, but they are proprietary and locked by a buying group of audiologists, and I can't service these hearing aids for her. She's 90 years old, and so that kind of a very frustrating situation. So that's something for consumers to be mindful of.
How long in general, you say her hearing aids aren't that old, how long in general would you expect hearing aids to last before they need to be replaced?
That can vary on a number of things. It can vary on whether the device that was fit on the patient has a wide fitting range. So if the patient's hearing loss changes over time, the devices can be reprogrammed. If a patient's loss drops significantly in a short amount of time, that can be a reason that the device will no longer be appropriate for them. The manufacturers will suggest 4 to 6 years as the timeline patients should consider investing in new technology. Typically, every 18 months, manufacturers come out with some new something. I will say the majority of our patients upgrade because they want the latest thing, kind of like getting the latest version of iOS on your iPhone or Windows on your desktop. So it's not always that the device is not working. It's just they want something a little better.
Dr. Stephanie Schaublad, thank you so much for talking with us on the People's Pharmacy today.
Thank you very much.
We hope you enjoyed this podcast. If so, please consider taking a minute to write a review on iTunes. And thanks for listening to the People's Pharmacy.
When a shopper places an order, you have one shot at winning them as a lifelong customer. I'm Al Coe, CEO of ShipStation. I'm obsessed with ShipStation being the most reliable and efficient way you can ship. At ShipStation, our promise is to make shipping easier for e-commerce business owners. We're focused on providing the most integrations with all the places you sell and automating manual tasks to make fulfillment easier for your team. We partner with all the major carriers to make sure you get the lowest possible rates because every dollar counts. So no matter what you're sending or where you're shipping to, ShipStation can get it there fast and keep your customers happy. See for yourself how ShipStation can reduce the time and effort you spend on order fulfillment. Go to ShipStation.com to sign up for your free trial. That's ShipStation.com.